Okay, folks, I think we'll begin. The 3 Squares Vermont webinar is beginning. Welcome, everyone. This is Angela Smith-Jang speaking, and I work with the Vermont Campaign to End Childhood Hunger. I work specifically on the 3 Squares Vermont program, doing both outreach and advocacy. And before we begin with the actual content of the webinar, I just wanted to go over a few items related to using your webinar technology. So you should be able to see a small side panel on your screen. Here's where you can see audio information and be able to ask questions. If your side panel is hidden, click on the red arrow to open it. You can also use the red arrow to minimize your side panel on your screen. In the audio window of the side panel, you have the option of using a telephone to call into the webinar or using a microphone and speakers attached to your computer. Choose one or the other option. If you're using a telephone number, the number to call, access ID, and PIN number you need are all listed. If you're having trouble hearing me or having trouble on your screen, email jharris@vtnohunger.org. or just give us a call at 865-0255, and we will try to help. Again, 865-0255 if you're having any problems. Throughout the webinar, you can ask questions by typing them into the question box in your side panel. Those questions will be recorded in a file, so if we're not able to answer them today in the time that we have, we'll definitely follow up with everyone after the webinar with answers to all the questions that have been asked in the question box. We'll also have time for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation for those who want to ask a live question. I would recommend that you use the telephone for these questions because we've had some trouble in the past hearing people when you're using your mic with your computer. When we get to the Q&A section, I'll ask that you click on the raise your hand icon that should be in your side panel. That way, I'll know you have a question, and I will unmute you to ask your question in the order that you've raised your hand, hopefully. Webinar technology is really a great thing, but there's bound to be glitches here and there, so please bear with us if we encounter any difficulties today. The goal of today's webinar is really to give you a better understanding of the change in 3 Squares Vermont's fuel and utility standards that will take effect October 1st. So that you can best respond and help the Vermonters that you work with. Following the presentation, we will also email you the PowerPoint, the Q&A, and any handouts that we talk about throughout. So I think we're ready to begin. I have with me today Renee Richardson, Director of the Food and Nutrition Team at the Department for Children and Families Economic Services Division. Renee, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everybody. I wish I could say it's a pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, it's always a pleasure to talk with folks, but not about a situation such as this.
Mm-hmm. So Renee, your voice, at least on my end, is kind of soft. So be sure to speak up into the phone. And I also have with me today Amy Darley, Benefit Programs Assistant Administrator for DCF ESD. Hi, Amy.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, and Renee and Amy are going to be helping walk us through the webinar content today. So what we're here to know is what to know and how to help. Renee, are you ready to begin?
I think so. Okay, I'm going to be talking about what is happening, and I apologize if my voice is soft on this line. Not very many people have ever said they had a hard time hearing what I had to say. As you know, every year we do a calculation to update the standard utility allowances that we use when we calculate the shelter deduction for 3 Squares Vermont benefits. That calculation, that annual calculation, is required by the Food and Nutrition Service, which is the federal agency that regulates the SNAP program, or in Vermont we call it 3 Squares Vermont. That regulatory authority requires states to do this calculation according to a methodology that has been approved by the Food and Nutrition Service. This year, when we did the methodology, it resulted in a drastic reduction in the standard utility allowance that we use for heating and cooling. There was a less drastic reduction in the standard that we use for plain utilities, such as electricity to fuel your stove or garbage and trash removal. That minor utility allowance is going to be reduced as well, but only by $5. And the standard utility allowance that we use for heating and cooling includes both the heating and cooling allowance and the minor utility allowance. For October of 2008, we calculated the standard utility allowances, and the calculation, because we had high fuel costs that year, resulted in a standard utility allowance of $744. Last year, we also calculated it for 2009, and the fuel costs had come down a little bit at that point, from $744 to about $687. We did not decrease it last year because F&S offered states that had a decrease in their standard utility allowance an opportunity to join a one-time blanket waiver that allowed us to hold our standards as is for the year. This year, for October 2010, when we calculated the standard, it decreased by even more, from $744 down to $614, which is a major decrease and will affect the benefit level for some households. When we found out that this decrease was going to happen, we were in touch with the feds in Boston and asked if there was a way for us to waive dropping the standard utility allowance again this year, like we did last year. And although they were very sympathetic to our case, they said that they would run it by the national office, which they did. And we got a response saying that we would not be allowed to not implement the decrease this year, that we had signed on to a one-time blanket waiver last year, and that states that used that waiver last year were not going to be allowed to use it again this year. Consequently, we asked F&S for a state-specific waiver that would allow us to hold the standard at $744 this year as well, always in the expectation that the fuel prices were going to start going up again. Now, to give you a little background here, in 2008, when we calculated the standard utility allowance to be $744 per month, and that's per month, we do not adjust it seasonally. So for 12 months out of the year, people get the full standard. In 2008, when we calculated that amount, the average cost of fuel oil was $4 per gallon. This year, when we calculated it, the average cost of fuel oil was $2.66 a gallon, a very obvious decrease. We base these numbers on the Vermont fuel price reports that you can find on the Department of Public Services website. Next slide. So what does this mean for Vermonters receiving 3Squares Vermont? Well, it means that about 16,000 households will get a notice this week that says that their 3Squares Vermont benefit will decrease as of October 1st due to a decrease in their allowed shelter deduction. The decrease, after doing a sampling of about 75 cases, we determined that the decrease may range from $7 per household to $40 per household per month. Unfortunately, the decrease will hit the majority of households affected will include a senior, somebody who's age 60 or older, or a person with a disability. And the reason for this is because these households do not have maximum shelter deductions put upon them. So they are allowed to take whatever their shelter cost is, we do the calculation, and they can deduct, whatever the calculation is. And I'm not going to go into that here because it's pretty complicated to describe on the phone. But other households that do not contain a senior or a person with a disability are only allowed to deduct a maximum of $458 per month as a shelter deduction, whereas the households that have seniors and people with disabilities can deduct far more than that because there's no cap on it. So that's why these households are the ones who are most often going to be affected by this type of a change.
Okay.
Next slide,
Thank
please.
you, Renee.
You're welcome.
Amy, did you want to talk about how Vermonters have been informed of the decrease?
Yes, I do. As Renee said before, every 3Squares Vermont household affected will receive a notice this week in the mail explaining the decrease and providing some additional resources for help. These notices should be received within the next day or two. I believe that they were mailed either late Monday or early Tuesday. It was last Friday that the Department for Children and Families shared this information regarding the decrease and how it came to be. We shared it through email with the whole AHS, Agency of Human Services staff. We put out a press release to the media, and we had lots of help, including the Campaign to End Childhood Hunger, to get the word out to community partners so that everyone was informed of the change and could look to being equipped to answer the questions for help. Also, just this morning, I did 4 groups of 4 or 5 call center staff for small mini trainings on how to handle calls. And that was a very good training, and I hope that that will help them as well as this webinar helping you. Next slide, please. So the big question is, what can we do? Number one always is that you are the ambassadors to your organization and to your network. So please do share your email of the webinar and any other materials and have discussions with people so that they too can become adept at talking about this. The info sheet that was emailed to you, the second page of it is called the Help Available. That's a nice chart that outlines other types of programs that may help to mitigate the impact of this decrease. So another way is to help Vermonters maximize their 3Squares Vermont benefits in other ways. For instance, to increase the medical deductions that they can take, which would then raise their net income. Reduce their net income and therefore perhaps increase their benefits. And there are other additional programs that we'll talk about soon.
Great. Thank you, Amy, very much. I think Renee is going to take the talk again specifically about the medical expense deduction. Yes. Renee?
Yes. Thank you, Angela. As Amy said, what can we do? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can find ways within the rules and regulations of this program that will allow folks to take additional income deductions that may be able to mitigate some of the loss of the standard utility allowance. In Vermont, if a senior or a person with a disability claims at least $35.01 of out-of-pocket medical expenses, they get a standard medical expense deduction of $138. This is a demonstration waiver that we got from the Food and Nutrition Service that allows us to maximize the deduction for seniors and people with disability so that they will be able to get more food benefits. If they have expenses that exceed $173, and this is getting into some technical details, I understand that, but if they have expenses that exceed $173, which if you do the math is $138 plus the first $35, then they can claim all of their out-of-pocket medical expenses and further reduce their countable earned income. And that can increase their benefits because when the countable earned income is reduced, the monthly food allotment is increased. We do not have a lot of penetration with seniors or with people with disability that actually take this medical expense deduction. I didn't look at the numbers, but it's roughly maybe 1/3 of the eligible population actually claim the medical expense deduction. So one of the things we can do is we can really become proactive about explaining what the medical expense deduction is, why it's important for seniors and people with disabilities to claim that deduction, and to explain to them what it is that they can actually deduct. Next slide, please. Medical expenses that people can claim include a very broad range of products and services. As you can see on the slide, we have some examples here. Basic care and health insurance, out-of-pocket costs for these things are deductible. Drugs, whether it's prescription drugs or over-the-counter drugs and equipment, are deductible. Services provided by an in-care home attendant, for example, or even services provided by a service animal that is specifically trained to provide service to an individual. The cost of food and veterinary care, et cetera, for those animals can be deducted. Transportation, this is a huge one and one that is often forgotten about. People can deduct mileage, the cost of their mileage, back and forth to pick up prescription drugs or over-the-counter drugs, or to go back and forth for their annual medical exams or dental exams or eye exams or physical therapy, any of these things. They can, if people can track their mileage for attending these various services or purchasing these various items, we can give them a mileage allowance. And that in and of itself, over the course of the certification period, could very easily equal $35 per month, which at the very least could give households the $138 deduction that actually could offset the $130 decrease in the standard utility allowance. Angela has brought up a flyer that is located on the www.vermontfoodhelp.com website, and this flyer shows you a comprehensive list of medical expenses that people can claim to reduce their bottom line net income and hopefully increase their food benefit. You can use this form to identify and list expenses and attach it to the application when you send it in or help somebody send in their application related to questions 43 and 44, which talk about the medical expense deduction. We can also help people to apply. I think we need to go to the next slide.
Oh, sure.
We asked Angela to control the mouse on this, so you'll have to bear with us. We can also help Vermonters apply for the Lifeline phone assistance, which is a program that is regulated by the Department of Public Service. Individuals who are eligible for 3Squares Vermont or for Reach Up, and I think maybe for Medicaid as well, but I'm not sure about that, are automatically eligible to receive the monthly credit for the Lifeline phone assistance. That's about $13 per month in phone credit that they can get, which means that's $13 a month not coming out of their pocket to pay for their telephone. You can phone our agency at the call center if you're interested in helping somebody enroll. There's no additional application that's needed. People can also apply for this on the tax return, the annual tax return, and I think that that's how most of our folks actually get into the Lifeline program. Not all phone companies participate in this program. For example, I don't believe AT&T participates, but Fairpoint does, but I'll give you a cautionary note here. Fairpoint right now is a little bit delayed in getting their services to people. I think they're about, I said a little bit, I think they're about 4 months behind in getting folks set up for the service, which in and of itself is a frustration. But I think you need to know that before you talk to folks about the Lifeline credit. Next slide, please. Okay.
Renee, did you want?
I think I took over Amy's role here.
You did a great job.
That's okay. Amy can do the next couple slides.
I'm all warmed up now.
Okay, good enough.
Many people are very familiar with fuel assistance, but you'd be surprised how many folks who actually receive 3Squares Vermont benefits don't receive fuel assistance. And this is a reminder that the income limits have increased to 185% of the federal poverty guideline for household size, and the asset test has been eliminated. So it follows the same income guidelines as 3Squares. So if somebody is eligible for 3Squares, they're likely eligible for some kind of fuel assistance, even if they are a heated renter. It's the same application now as the 3Squares Vermont. You may affectionately know that as the 202. The folks who apply, will use that application. If they've received fuel assistance in the past, however, there is a much shorter annual review form. One thing of note is that when folks call the call center and ask about their benefits, the call center staff can pull up their case and they can see if they are what benefits that they're receiving. So the call center staff will automatically, and have been doing this for a while, when they see that someone is not enrolled in one of our benefit programs, they reach out to the caller and let them know about what they might be eligible for. So again, the call center number is at the bottom of the slide, 1-800-479-6151, and now you can go also to the mybenefits.vermont.gov and apply online. And here comes the next slide. This is a great program, and it's through the Vermont Food Bank, and it is called Commodity Supplemental Food Program, or CSFP. It's a program by the USDA that provides a monthly box of nutritious food, including canned fruits and veggies, juices, cereal, cheese, etc., to eligible households. We calculated that it is worth about $50 of food each month. The eligibility is based on age and income. If you are familiar with the Help Available chart that was in the back, that was attached to your email announcement, you will see more details about who is eligible. But folks, seniors who are 60 and above also need to meet the income guideline, and the income guideline is 130% of the federal poverty guidelines. There also are other folks that are eligible, including kids that have been on WIC but aren't yet quite 6, but have graduated from WIC, and also I believe it's pregnant women. I don't have it in front of me. But the main thing is there is no waiting list for this program. So this is a very important phone number to have at hand. The folks that I talked to recently, some of them had said that they had heard from callers that they had applied and there was a big waiting list. I just want to let you know that I believe was a couple of years ago, and don't check it off as no can do, because now they don't have a waiting list, and there are lots of people who do meet that 130% federal poverty guideline that just by calling might be able to sign up for the CSFP. Another occasionally mentioned barrier to this program is transportation. I believe that the packages can be delivered to the local senior center or food shelf. I also believe that the food bank has a list of volunteers that can assist in getting that food out to people's houses. So bottom line, call the food bank. So I guess we're on to the next slide.
So, okay, this is Angela. This is where I take over again and open things up to open it up to questions from folks. I've been trying to answer some of the questions that have been coming in the question box. And I also want to make sure that folks that are on the phone have the opportunity to ask questions as well. So if you have a question, what you need to do is just click on the raise your hand icon so that I know that you have a question. And at that point, I will try to unmute you so that you can ask your question. Frank Mazza, do you have a question? Hello, Frank? Okay, I can't hear Frank.
He may not have his audio turned on correctly.
Yeah, sometimes with your computer, if you're using a mic and speakers on your phone, it can be tricky. So I'm going to try to unmute Ellie Hayes. Ellie, do you have a question?
You probably can't hear me either.
We can hear you.
Ellie?
You just sound a little muffled.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
sadly.
I just wanted to add what Amy was saying about commodities, just a correction that on the application there is a page where you can fill out, appoint somebody as a proxy to go to the pickup site where the commodities are dropped off, which is most of those senior housing, senior meal sites, some other places like the Berry Auditorium, etc. around the state. You can appoint a proxy and then the food bank will be happy to give the food to that person.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Can Renee, if you heard what Ellie was saying, can you repeat that for everyone?
Ellie, let me be sure that I understood what you said, that there is a section on the form for applying for the Commodity Supplemental Food Program that allows someone to name a proxy to go in their stead to the food bank to pick up, or to the senior center or wherever the Commodity Supplemental Food is being distributed, to go and pick it up for somebody who may be homebound. Is that correct, Ellie?
That is correct. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank
Hello?
you.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Ellie.
Okay.
So I've muted Ellie. Are there anyone else with a question on the phone? Okay, I see another hand raised. Susan McIntosh. I'm going to try to unmute you, Susan. You want to ask your question?
Okay, I just have to get clear. I may have misunderstood. So in order to be eligible for the commodities food, do they need to have the low income and be one of those age groups? I mean, the 60 plus or a child not yet 6? Or is it, they have to both? I mean, or could just someone with older children who's not over 60 but meets the income guideline, are they eligible?
I can answer that. On the second page of the info sheet that went out with the emails that you got, there's a chart. And on this chart it says people 60 or older living in Vermont and income eligible. So that would be 130% of federal poverty guideline. The second category is children under 6 not already in WIC and income eligible. The third category is pregnant or postpartum women not already in WIC and income eligible. So it is a very specific set of categories. It does not automatically include folks who have disabilities, for instance.
Okay, or a household who has reach up, but they don't have, the newborn not yet on WIC, or the person, approaching 6 years old.
I don't know about the interaction with Reach Up. It doesn't say that they can't be on Reach Up.
Oh, well, I guess I was thinking, if those folks could get this, who don't have, those young children, who have maybe 12-year-old children and 14-year-old children.
It doesn't look like that.
Doesn't look like they can.
Yeah,
okay.
Not this particular program. I mean, part of the reason we're focusing on this outreach for this particular program is because of the high impact for elders, people 60 or older.
Okay.
Great, Susan. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Angela? Angela?
Yes? Mm-hmm.
I see that there was a question asked early on about why other states are not reducing their standard utility allowances.
Sure. Do you want to
give a
little more explanation?
Yes, I'd like to give a little more detail about that.
Sure.
This is absolutely true. Not all states are decreasing their standard utility allowances, and that is because these allowances are based on the prices within the state itself. They're not regional, they're not national. Each state has its own methodology that has been approved by the federal government to calculate this based on the prices in that state. In the Northeast region, which includes New England and New York, both Maine and Connecticut are also going to have to reduce their standard utility allowance for heating and cooling. And some other of the northern tier states that have historically had higher fuel prices may have to reduce theirs as well. Some of the southern states are actually increasing theirs based on their calculation. So this is not an across-the-board calculation. It is very state-specific, and so the prices that we have, the standard utility allowance that we have in Vermont is Vermont-specific, and it's actually probably among the 3 highest standard utility allowances in the United States. So, so not all states are reducing them because each state has a different set of circumstances.
Great. Renee, in follow-up to that question, there was also a question that if fuel prices in Vermont increased dramatically over the winter, could the standard utility allowance be recalculated?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. In March 2006, we actually did that. We had done our calculation in October of 2005 for the following year, the following federal fiscal year. And at that time, that's when fuel prices really started to climb. And because we saw that fuel prices were climbing, we asked for permission from FNS, the Food and Nutrition Service, to do a mid-year adjustment. And we did that, and we actually increased our standard utility allowance. So our plan is to monitor this on a monthly basis by reviewing the Vermont fuel price reports on a monthly basis. And if we start to see the fuel prices going up enough to make a difference, then we will approach FNS and ask to be able to do another mid-year adjustment. Normally this happens at the same time as FNS issues their standards for the year, which are effective on October 1st, but we do have some wiggle room there if we see that prices are starting to go up again. So we will be watching that very closely.
Great. Thank you, Renee. I'm looking to see if there are more hands raised, and I see some other questions in the question box as well. So I'm going to take a couple of those for a moment. What is the current federal poverty guideline? Will you attach that at the end? We can send an attachment with the Q&A and with the handouts for sure. The federal poverty guidelines for 3Squares Vermont are not changing in October. They're remaining the same. The income limits are remaining the same as they were in 2010, 2009-2010 fiscal year. Renee, did you want to add anything on that?
Only that the reason for this is because of a relatively flat consumer price index. Those standards are based upon increases and changes in the consumer price index. And because we're in a recession, that consumer price index has not gone up in a couple of years, at least not enough to make a difference in the federal poverty guidelines. So the federal poverty guidelines have been held the same for about 2 or 3 years now.
Okay. Here's another question for you, Renee. Food stamp rules appear to require compliance with the Administrative Procedures Act,
yes,
where there is a decrease in the SUA. Has the state been submitting to this through the APA process? Do you want to explain that as well?
We're in the process of filing a rule that will allow us to do this according to the Administrative Procedures Act. We have been told by the Food and Nutrition Service that that rule, that is a Vermont-specific rule, is non-compliant with federal regulations, and therefore it is invalid, and we must implement this change on October 1st. So we are needing to comply with the federal regulations because this program is regulated by the USDA Food and Nutrition Service at the federal level. So we're working on that now.
Thanks. I see that there's another hand raised. I'm going to take a question on the phone. Ellie, did you have another question?
No, I wasn't going to have a question.
Okay. I think the hand just stayed raised. So I don't see any more questions on the telephone right now. So let's.
Renee might want to take the question regarding the Congressional Delegation.
Yes,
That would be great.
I just pulled that up. I have actually, I believe that David Cohen from Senator Sanders' office is on the line. I've actually been having some conversations with him this morning, and we'll be getting more information back to him about this change, and with some ideas about how we might be able to, affect the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. There's another question that I tried to answer, Renee, but maybe you can give a little more information as well. Okay. Why are the elderly and disabled now required to bring a form to their doctor to validate the over-the-counter medication for their medical expense deduction?
There are actually many ways that they can do that, and I believe that form is one of the ways that they can validate it. I do not believe it's a requirement, at least from my perspective, it's not a requirement. We have a policy interpretation, a procedural PP&D, I think it is, that actually says that we will accept a client's claim of over-the-counter cost that are recommended by their doctor as long as they do not appear to be questionable. Even with those items, they would need to verify what they are, like bring in receipts, bring in a statement from, a slip from the store that they bought where they bought their Advil, or where they may have bought their, other medical equipment or whatever. We do not absolutely require a signature by a provider unless we think that the item that they're claiming is a questionable item. Like if somebody were to claim that they had to take 30 aspirin a day, for example, that would be a questionable item. So it's my understanding that this is not a required form, and I will double check to see if other people have a different understanding here.
Right, because it may be possible that some some caseworkers are requiring more verification than might be necessary.
And it may be misunderstanding of what the actual rule is. And sure. the fact that there's a form does not necessarily mean that that form always has to be used. For example, we have a shelter deduction form, that shelter verification form that people can use to document their shelter costs. But we can also allow them to document that by providing us with a rent receipt or a canceled check or that sort of thing. So there are many more than one way to document these types of expenses.
Great. Great. Okay. Well, I think that about wraps up most of the questions that have been asked. And as I said at the beginning, we will definitely send out the Q&A with all the responses in the follow-up email from the webinar. And you are, of course, welcome to contact any of us at any time if you have further questions. I'm also hoping that the recording of this webinar worked, and that I can send a link to a recorded version out to folks for those of your colleagues and other organizations who may have missed this that would want this information. So we're hopefully going to spread the word so that we can really make sure that 3Squares Vermont households are maximizing their benefits as well as receiving all of the program benefits that they could, whatever programs they might be eligible for. So before we finish up, Renee or Amy, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we say sign off?
Well, I'm heartened by the large number of people that came together to be part of this webinar. It shows that it was needed, and it shows that a lot of people care about helping the folks that are being affected.
And I echo that, and I also want to just explain to folks how this is a very difficult decision that we have made, and it's actually not a decision that we made. It's a choice that was taken away from us by our federal partners. And that's why we have mobilized as quickly as we have to see if there's any way that we can mitigate for this decrease in benefits. And we really thank you for being there and for being our voice and our ears in the community to work with these folks as we move forward. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you all for participating in the webinar today, and we appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.